So I haven't really been following this Savannah Guthrie story at all because I believe it's a totally fake story, 110%. And that feeling is only reinforced by the fact that I heard that Guthrie used a line from The Silence of the Lambs in her plea to the so-called kidnappers of her mother. And what weird timing for all of this to be happening, right? As The Silence of the Lambs premiered in New York City on January 30th, 1991, and her mother supposedly went missing either January 31st or February 1st, almost 35 years to the day of this film's release, and now she's basically quoting the movie. And as you can see here, January 30th premiere, February 14th, wide release. And like I said, what incredibly interesting timing, because who just died on February 14th? Tom Noonan, who played the killer Francis Dollarhide in the very first ever Hannibal Lecter film, Manhunter. So we get this bit from Guthrie from Silence of the Lambs in the news, and then Noonan dies on the anniversary of the Silence of the Lambs wide release. I mean, what the hell's going on here? Now, I also want you to take a look at this odd bit of newscasting here. Listen to what she says. This woman by the name of Mary Carrillo was Savannah Guthrie's replacement for the Olympics.
Right now, of course, Savannah and her family are in unspeakable, unfathomable pain. You know in the U.S. that her extended family is Legion. Savannah, my friend, it's the same way here.
So you hear that? Her extended family is Legion. What an incredibly bizarre word to use. And we know all about that word, don't we? So guess what, Savannah? Your replacement at the Olympics just outed you and your creepy family as demons. Legion, for you are many. And by the way, since Tom Noonan was in the original Hannibal Lecter film, and he died on the same date Silence of the Lambs went to wide release, Valentine's Day or Lupercalia, going from its release to Noonan's death, 12,784 days. That is your 12/7 Pearl Harbor with your 84, and it was just the 84th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. Now, what are the odds of that, my friends? I ask you, because I think that is a virtual impossibility. I mean, it's bad enough that he was in the first Hannibal Lecter film, and he dies on the same date that The Silence of the Lambs, the most famous Hannibal Lecter film, went into wide release. And this is right after the whole Guthrie thing with her quoting The Silence of the Lambs on the news. No way this is a coincidence. Our Pearl Harbor with our 84, and it was just the 84-year anniversary. Not to mention, if I remember correctly, I think Nancy Guthrie was born on January 27th, right? So that's another 12/7. Again, I told you I wasn't really following this case, but it gets even better. Not only was she born on January 27th, which is our 12/7 numbers, but she turned 84 this year, right after the 84-year anniversary of Pearl Harbor. And going from The Silence of the Lambs release date to Tom Noonan's death date, is 12/7/84. Come on, man. Can't you see what they're doing here? They're putting all this stuff into the subconscious. All of it for a reason. Like with the Idaho 4, the Gonsalves. In fact, let's see what is 84 days after 12/7. It would be Sunday, March 1st, 2026. So maybe the Guthrie case will be solved on March 1st. Now, I don't make predictions on this channel. I just use the numbers and look into the puzzle. I do hypotheticals. I don't make my own predictions. But hey, with the way they're doing this, maybe she's found on March 1st, 2026. I'm not saying she will be, but hey, maybe. And hey, don't forget Mr. Robert Dorgan, pictured here with a tiger. Dorgan, of course, a Transformer weirdo. Well, who is the serial killer in Silence of the Lambs? Buffalo Bill? Someone who believes he was born into the wrong body, and it turns out that he is denied having a sex change operation, and as a result, that leads to him kidnapping and skinning women for the purpose of making a woman suit to fulfill his desire of female transformation. So again, all of this in the news at this time for a reason. It's all connected. And worth noting, like Tom Noonan, Ted Levine, who plays Buffalo Bill, is also in the movie Heat, which of course was inspired by Chuck Adamson, who played Barry Dorgan in The Stand. And while I don't know the whole story with Robert Dorgan, if he actually had an operation, or if he even was a transformer, or if he was just somebody playing a character for a psyop, but in this film, The Silence of the Lambs, he actually does have to tuck it. You know, like Paw Tucket. His character has to tuck it. And really, the most disturbing thing about this film, other than having to see that kind of thing, is the story about the poor lambs being, I don't even like to say the word. That is easily the most traumatic part of the film for me personally. But yeah. But don't forget this Dorgan pictured with the tiger here, because in Manhunter, Tom Noonan's character actually has a love interest, a blind woman. And as a surprise, he takes her to pet a tiger. Obviously sedated, of course. And here she is, basically hugging the tiger as Dollarhide watches in the background. As an animal lover, it's a beautiful scene, but they're also obviously referencing it in the story with Dorgan. And note that Noonan's character has a red dragon tattooed on his chest. Again, he is the Red Dragon serial killer. This film, Manhunter, is adapted from the novel Red Dragon. Like Dorgan is an anagram for dragon. Now, instead of Anthony Hopkins, Brian Cox plays Hannibal Lecter in this film. Born June 1st, 1946. So he was born only 13 days before Trump. And by the way, Brian Cox is also in The Ring, which I know Garo asked me to do a video on, and I will do that soon. So in Manhunter, Will Graham, a former FBI criminal profiler, retired following a mental breakdown after being attacked by serial killer Dr. Hannibal Lecter, whom he captured. His former FBI superior Jack Crawford visits him to seek help with a new serial killer case. Graham agrees to visit the most recent crime scene in Atlanta, where he tries to enter the mindset of the killer, dubbed the Tooth Fairy by the police for bite marks left on his victims. So Graham visits Lecter, a former psychiatrist, and asks for his insight into the killer's motivations. Lecter agrees to look at the case file later. He obtains Graham's home address by deceit, while ostensibly making a phone call to his attorney. Later, Graham is contacted by Crawford, who patches Graham through to Frederick Chilton, Lecter's warden, who has found a note in Lecter's personal effects. They realize it is from the Tooth Fairy, expressing admiration for Lecter and an interest in Graham. And apparently Lecter and the Tooth Fairy were contacting each other through coded messages via the National Tatler, a newspaper. And the FBI winds up decoding Lecter's coded message to the Tooth Fairy. It is Graham's home address with an instruction to kill Graham and his family. So in this film, Lecter and the Tooth Fairy have a relationship through a newspaper which they use to communicate. So, while never in any scenes together, they are in each other's orbit, which means going from Brian Cox's birth date to Tom Noonan's birth date. Go figure. It's 1776 days. When was the United States founded? July 4th, 1776. Why is this year such a huge deal? Because it's the 250-year anniversary of the country. Again, I ask you, what are the odds? This stuff's being put into the news for a reason. Red Dragon, Dorgan. The dragon is getting ready to awaken. They're telling you that. Also, 4 years, 10 months, 11 days. What is 11 days after April 10th? 4/21, the Seattle Space Needle's opening date. And remember that Noonan was born on 4/12, just like Shannon Doherty. 4/12 or 4/21. In fact, consider this May 8th. What is 11 days after 5/8? 5/19. And 5/19 is the 421st composite, your Seattle Space Needle opening date yet again. Cox was also born 29,113 days before Noonan's death. 29 plus 113 is 142. Memphis's founding date is 5/22, the 142nd day of the year. Also the Gift Tower Sacrifice air date. So how interesting that both Brian Cox's full name and Tooth Fairy equal our big 137 number, the 33rd prime. They also both equal 822, which can also be your backwards 228. And those are the only two ciphers they match in. Also worth noting that Brian Cox equals 214, and Tom Noonan died on 214. The Silence of the Lambs was released on 214. 1334 is the 1116th composite, your upside down 91101 number. And by the way, speaking of that 214, 214 is the 166th composite, and 166 itself is the 127th composite. And you see how all of this stuff is connecting to the 12-7. Tooth Fairy also has the 8-4, and 633 is the 517th composite for another 137 because 517 is the 137th day of the year. And by the way, the guy who runs the newspaper that Lecter and Dollarhide, aka the Tooth Fairy, were communicating through, the character is named Freddie Lowndes. That name gives us our 147, the Golden Gate Bridge birthday, 147th day of the year, May 27th. Our 5-7. Remember that 5-7 is the 127th day of the year. More 12-7 connections. Seattle Slew died on that date. Also, Michelle Trachtenberg died on the 57th day of the year, 226, which, of course, is a code for 2026. All the codes surrounding Michelle pointed to this year, way back when she died last February. 177, I'll get back to that in a minute. 60, we just had Super Bowl 60, and remember that 60 is the 42nd composite, and the 60th composite is 84. So not only do we just have the big Elvis Super Bowl, but it connects to 42 and 84. And of course here we have our 162, 611, you drop that 0, 882, which can be a 162 because 8 plus 8 is 16. 903 is the 42nd triangular number for your 42, and the 903rd prime is 7019 or 719, Trump's reverse birth date. And now for why that 177 is an important number. The composite is 226. Again, Michelle Trachtenberg died on 226, and she heavily coded that this is the big year, way ahead of time. If you're familiar with all my past videos on this channel, you know what I mean. And by the way, William Peterson played Graham, and he just so happened to have his birthday yesterday. Turned 73, our EL number. So Peterson was born 1 year, 10 months, 9 days after Noonan. That's your backwards 9/11. Of course, it can also be your 110. Remember, there are 110 floors in each of the World Trade Center towers. Of course, 110 plus 9 is 119. 22 months, 9 days, and 22 times 9 is 198. Remember, that's our President Trump number. And beast in Latin, the difference between the 888 beast system number and 1086, the beast system number. And the title Manhunter gives us some very interesting numbers, but I want to point out the 429, April 29th, is the 119th day of the year. And the composite is 529, JFK's birthday. Also this 744, because it is the 611th composite number. Now remember how Savannah Guthrie used the line from Silence of the Lambs when speaking to the kidnappers? Well, isn't it creepy then that Nancy Guthrie and Hannibal Lecter both equal 145 and 64 in the first two ciphers? The two most important ciphers, of course. They also match in Sumerian, but these are the big ones. And by the way, 145 is the 110th composite, and the 145th day of the year, of course, is 525, Shannon's final date on Beverly Hills 90210, George Floyd death date, Pearl Harbor wide release date. And again, incredibly important that the Space Needle turns 64 this year because it's an absolutely loaded number. The 8th square, the 4th cube, your 8-4 connection, The sum of the divisors is 127 or 12.7. It's the 45th composite. The 64th prime is 311. 3 times 11, 33. And the 64th composite is your 88. And remember Transformer shooter Robert Dorgan? Wouldn't you know he equals the 137, just like Brian Cox and Tooth Fairy. Though Tooth Fairy was not the Transformer killer, that was in Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill. However, the Tooth Fairy does have the tiger connection. Now with this dude Eric Dane dying, of course look at his birth date, November 9th, you're backwards 9/11. Of course he just died on February 19th. I had no idea who this guy was, but I am very familiar with his wife, Rebecca Gayheart of Urban Legend fame, Scream 2, a bunch of other teen movies from the period. Now 6/11 born Joshua Jackson is in Urban Legend, and in this scene here, this is a class on urban legends, and they're talking about the urban legend of not drinking Pop Rocks and soda together. Joshua Jackson eats the Pop Rocks and drinks a product placement Pepsi. And his character decides to pull a stupid prank, but I want you to listen to what this one guy says. He's gonna explode, and the guy's born on 6/11. Like, 6/11 is gonna explode. Some subliminal programming in there. And this is what ends up happening to his character. So, it's the urban legend where, the girl's boyfriend is hung above the car and his feet are scraping on the roof. She thinks it's something else and drives away, leaving him to hang. And it turns out that Rebecca Gayheart's character, Brenda, is the killer because the main character did an urban legend, the gang initiation, where you leave your headlights off at night and the first person to flash you, you chase them. They did that to her fiance and as a prank, and it wound up causing an accident which killed him, and she's getting revenge, killing people by way of urban legends. So in a bit of ironic life imitating art, or perhaps it was just a humiliation ritual, I don't know, on June 13th, 2001, while driving a vehicle owned by Australian actor Marco Leonardi, Gayheart struck 9-year-old Jorge Cruz Jr. as he walked across an LA street. Cruz died of his injuries the next day. Gayheart paid the family $10,000 for funeral expenses. On August 7, 2001, she made her only public statement on the incident. The pain of the tragedy will live with me forever. Despite the allegations in the lawsuit, the facts will establish that this was a most unfortunate accident. On November 27, 2001, Gayheart pleaded no contest to vehicular manslaughter. She was sentenced to 3 years of probation, a 1-year suspension of her license, a $28,000 fine, and 750 hours of community service. Cruz's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit that was settled out of court. Now, I want you to look at these dates. June 13th, a very important date for many reasons. Don't forget that in The Stand, Elvis fan Charlie Campion selfishly releases the plague upon the world because instead of staying put, he decides to flee with his family. 11/27 is of significance as well. Taylor Swift, of course, is supposed to get married on June 13th of this year. Her favorite numbers, 13, 31. Now I'm going to show you something that I'm going to talk about further in a future video, just to show you the importance of the date. Now this is something I'm going to talk about further when I talk about the ring, but Blue Mustang at the Denver airport, which I have been to, by the way, known as Lucifer, was built or sculpted by Luis Jimenez. And Jimenez was born in El Paso, which of course has also been in the news recently. And he died on June 13th, 2006. That date again. And how did he die? Blood loss from an artery severed when a piece of Blue Mustang fell on him. So yeah, I found some very interesting stuff with this, but I will get to that in my ring video. Gayheart, by the way, is from Hazard, Kentucky. Area code 606, or your 66 twin number. And to tie this all together, her husband before Eric Dane was Brett Ratner. The book Manhunter was remade. Actually, the book was Red Dragon, but it was readapted in 2002 with Anthony Hopkins in the Hannibal role, capitalizing on his success in the role from Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal. And who directed Red Dragon? Brett Ratner, Rebecca Gayheart's former husband. Now, what are the odds of all this connecting at the same exact time? So going from Brett Ratner's birth to Tom Noonan's death, 20,777 days. Whenever you see that 777 number, it's always big. And 7 plus 7 plus 7 is 21. So this will be 221. Of course, William Peterson, birthday 221. He was the star of Manhunter, which Red Dragon is a remake of. And 20 times 777 is 15,540. 540 plus 15 would give us our big 555 number. And Ratner was born 20,782 days before his ex's husband passed away. 7 plus 8 plus 2 is 17. 217. The Fire Horse year just started on 217. It's our weapons number, etc. Also, 56 plus 10 plus 22 is your 88 portal, trump, infinity number. Or if you want to look at this as 5-6, as in May 6th, add 10 and then 22, and guess what? You land on 6-7. And 682 plus 22 is 704. Again, 7-4, the big date this year for the 250th anniversary. You also have your 6-8 with your 222 Order Out of Chaos, as above, so below number. Washington, born on that date. 68 can be your backwards 86. And it works both ways because 222 is the same no matter which way you say it. And before I move on, don't forget that Chuck Adamson, born on 6/11/1936, also died on February 22nd, which of course is today's date. Which means not only was he born on 6/11, but he died on George Washington's birth date, which I of course forgot to mention in my previous video. A big deal, so worth mentioning. Even more so since his character in The Stand dies in a nuke blast. So naturally I need to check from his death date to 6/11 this year, and go figure, It's 6684 days. Our twin number with our 84. Go figure, right? 6 plus 6 is 12. 8 plus 4 is 12. Twin 12s. 12 plus 12 is 24. It's still 24 years since 9/11. And of course, with the twin 12s, 1 plus 2 is 3. 1 plus 2 is 3. That can also be your 33. And 66 plus 84 equals 150. And the 150th composite is 195. Trump's ear clip and Shannon Doherty's death date is the 195th day of the year, 7/13, because it was a leap year. Otherwise, it would have been the 194th. And speaking of the stand, getting back to Gayheart, going from the Plague's release date in the stand to her running over that kid in LA, 4,018 days. 40 plus 18 is 58. And of course, the Stand miniseries premiered on 5/8. Deep Impact released on 5/8. Robert Duvall just died. By the way, Elijah Wood was in that film with Robert Duvall, and in the same year, he starred in The Faculty about aliens with a girl named Clea Duvall. Elijah Wood, that is. And 5/8 is also, of course, Erica's wedding date. And if we go from the date of her accident to Swift's wedding later this year, it's 9,131 days. 9 plus 1 is 10. 3 plus 1 is 4. 10/4. Guess when Red Dragon released? Yep. 10/4, 2002. 124 minutes long. Directed by her ex. Remember that the 124th composite is 162. And by the way, that means that The Ring, starring the original Hannibal Lecter, Brian Cox, only came out 2 weeks later, because it came out on October 18th, 2002. Which reminds me, let's go from the date of Gayhart's accident to the death of Jimenez while building Blue Mustang, aka Blucifer. 1826 days. That's your 1/8 Elvis birth date, with your 26 pointing to the year 26. And of course, 18 plus 26 is your 44 kill number. Also 60 months. You know how big of a number that is. 260 weeks, 6 days. You're 26 with your 66 twin number. Going from Rebecca's birth date to her husband's death date, 19,915 days. The 199th day of the year is July 18th. 15 days after that is August 2nd. Not only is that J.D. Vance's birth date, but it's also the 214th day of the year. Who just died on 2/14? Tom Noonan. And her ex directed the remake of the film he was in. Of course, that also means that 199 plus 15 equals 214. And here you have your 54 with your 6, 7. 54 plus 6 plus 7 actually is 67. And if you want to make this even better, and consider this September 15th, 19 days after 9/15 would be 10/4, Red Dragon's release date. And the guy who took over the role of Dollarhide, aka the Tooth Fairy in Red Dragon, is Ralph Fiennes, born December 22nd, 1962. From his birth to Noonan's death, 23,065 days. 23 plus 65 is your 88 Portal Trump Infinity number. And 2 times 3 times 6 times 5 is 180. Now, Noonan was also in this X-Files episode called Paper Hearts. How ironic, given that he died on Valentine's Day. All about the hearts. It was season 4, episode 10, but check out the production code 4x8. Your 4884. And if we go from his death date to that episode's, or from that episode's air date to his death date, it's 10,653 days. 6 plus 5 plus 3 is 14. 1014. Charlie Kirk born on 1014. Also 29 years, 1 month, 30 days. 29 plus 1 plus 30 is 60. Again, you know why that number is important, especially here lately. You can also consider this 291 plus 30, and that would equal 321. Remember that 321 is the 254th composite. 254th day of the year is 9/11. And remember that Alcatraz, with its 6/11 connections, closed as a prison on 321. Now with the episode title Paper Hearts, we have our big 12-7 connection yet again, our 127. And remember that 12 times 7 is 84. We also have our 55 Satan number and our 555 down there in reverse satanic, our 44 kill number. The episode's initials, PH, would add up to 168. And the 168th composite is 21684. Now in the episode, Noonan plays John Lee Roach, a murderer of children who is already in prison. At the start of the episode, they find one of his victims' bodies, and it turns out that the victim is from a place called King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. A very weird name, I thought. So King of Prussia equals 165, 66. Of course, Trump born on the 165th day of the year. We got our 66 twin number. In reverse Sumerian, we have our big upside down 91101. Speaking of which, the 186th prime number is 1109. 990 is the 44th triangular number, and the 823rd composite. Of course, that is the date, 8/23, of the big earthquake and escape from LA. Also Kobe Bryant's birth date. And we, of course, have our 822 here, or backwards 228. Elvis died on the 228th day of the year. And I wanted to make special note of the 641 because it is the 116th prime, our backwards 611. Add the PA acronym. The 182nd prime is 1091, 911 numbers again. We have our 74, our backwards 322, our 88, our 713, Trump ear clip date, Shannon Doherty death date. And go ahead and type Pennsylvania with it. We have our backwards 9/11, our 142, the 142nd day of the year is Memphis's founding date, and the Gift Tower Sacrifice air date, May 22nd. And our big 317 number, our backwards 713, the 137. And remember that Final Destination was released on 317 in the year 2000. Kurt Russell, who was in At the World's Fair with Elvis, born on 317. And check out the numbers on there, 317, 401. That, of course, is our 317, 713, big 137 number. And it's also a backwards 14. Remember, he died on the 14th. Roche was a vacuum salesman, which is how he picked the kids he was going to go after. Wouldn't you know it equals our 165 again? In fact, it equals it twice because 213 is the 165th composite. Remember, Trump born on the 165th day of the year. So that's two 165s here. Also 39. Michelle Trachtenberg died at the age of 39. And 39 is the 26th composite, pointing to the year 2026. Again, she had many, many 26 codes surrounding her. We also have our 51, 5-1 is May Day, the day of pagan sacrifice. Roche kills with an Alice in Wonderland MO. Alice in Wonderland equals year 1776. He refers to the camper on his vehicle as the Mad Hat. Mad Hat equals 47. 115 is the 84th composite, year 84. 144 is the 109th composite, 10-9, Yale Skull and Bones founding date. 254th day of the year is 9/11. The 282nd day of the year is 10-9, Yale Skull and Bones founding date. And of course, as I've said before, that can be your 162 or 216, depending on which 2 you multiply by the 8. Also, that 257, it's the 55th prime, but also the 257th prime is 1621. Drop that one at the end, and it's just your 162. Now, at one point, to help find the remaining victims that are still buried and unaccounted for, they take him out of prison, and check out the flight number, 1650. Again, Trump born on the 165th day of the year, so a lot of 165s associated with this episode. Now, remember how I said the 11/27 date was important in Rebecca Gayhart's legal troubles? Why is that?
Where were you in 1973?
What the hell year?
November. 27th of November.
So it turns out one of the leads of the series, his sister, who he believes was abducted by aliens, he comes to believe that Roach actually may have abducted her. So his sister, which is a huge overarching plot throughout the series, was abducted on November 27th, 1973. So then what are the odds that it was on November 27th that Gayhart pleaded no contest? I mean, she is obviously connected to Noonan through her ex, Brett Ratner, who remade the film Noonan is probably most known for, Manhunter. I mean, come on now. And her husband dies just days after Noonan dies. Her husband that starred on a show based out of Seattle, apparently. I never watched the show. Ever. So I have no idea. I had no idea until I read about it. I think it was actually filmed in LA, but was supposed to take place in Seattle. Her husband also actually appeared on Charmed, though it was well after Shannon Doherty had left the show. So if we go from 11/27/73 to 11/27/2001, it's 10,227 days. 2 plus 2 plus 7 is 11. 10/11, October 11th. Michelle Trachtenberg was born on 10/11, which is 9 months and 11 days into the year, the 284th day of the year. And continuing on with the Pearl Harbor connection, she was murdered. Yes, I'm saying it, murdered, because I 100% believe that she was 9 months and 11 days before the 84-year anniversary of Pearl Harbor, 284 days before the 84-year anniversary of Pearl Harbor. And remember that 10 times 11 equals 110. There are 110 floors in each of the World Trade Center towers. And she was in the Gift Tower Sacrifice episode, aired on Memphis's founding date, 5/22. And it was season 5, episode 22. 5 times 22 is also 110. 2 110s, 1 for each of the towers. In fact, it still connects to Trachtenberg. If you want to say that this is February 27th, because 10 days after that would be March 9th, or 3/9, and Michelle died at the age of 39. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there were a big uptick in teen movies and teen shows. Gay Heart was a part of it. Sarah Michelle Gellar, Michelle Trachtenberg, all of them. And I think it actually started with the first Scream film when it exploded in popularity. Remember that the new one, from the creator of Dawson's Creek no less, comes out on 2/27 this year. Also exactly 28 years. Remember that 28 is considered a perfect number, is the 18th composite, and the 28th composite is 42. Go figure, right? Elvis's birth date and his death age. Also, don't forget the 28 Days Later franchise, which is still going and connects to a lot of things. Now remember how this Mary Carrillo creature called Guthrie's family Legion? Born March 15th, and go figure that's the 74th day of the year. 7/4, the 250th anniversary of the country. And it really reminds me of the film Exorcist 3, aka Legion, which stars Brad Dourif as the Gemini killer. Of course, Trump, Gemini twins, Elvis, etc. And this film came out in 1990 and has a lot of similarities to the Hannibal Lecter films, actually, with a murderer in prison being interviewed by a detective. In fact, I'm pretty sure that Exorcist 3 inspired this X-Files episode, Beyond the Sea, in which Dourif stars as an imprisoned serial killer, again, who is being interviewed, just like he does in Exorcist 3. In fact, Don S. Davis of Twin Peaks fame, who was born on 8/4, is in that episode as Agent Scully's father, and his nickname for her in that episode is Starbuck. Where was Starbucks founded? Seattle. And her dad winds up dying in that episode. Dourif claims that he can channel her dead dad. But yeah, a lot of connections there too. And if you don't think this episode is connected, by the way, look at who wrote it. Glenn Morgan and James Wong, the director and writer of Final Destination. All about Flight 180, where Ali Larder says 6 or 7 instead of just 6 or 7 to get that 67 in there. And it aired on January 7th, 1994, the day before Elvis's birthday. Directed by David Nutter, who directed Disturbing Behavior, which takes place in a town called Cradle Bay, Washington, and is a very coded film itself that I will talk about in the future, starring Katie Holmes, who was on Dawson's Creek with James Vanderbeek and Joshua Jackson. But anyway, all glory to God. I mean, what a tangled web we weave, huh? Thank you for watching.